Hello everyone and welcome back. I'm Deziel, and in today's video I'm showing you how to do a panel skirt. Now we're ready to do the second style. That is going to be the style 101. It's a panel skirt and you'll be able to follow with the little document where you can see the plan and the pattern piece. Before to start today's style, I just want to clarify a little point, and this is because one question that I got asking, why do we do twice the same thing? So my answer was yes, it's true. We have twice exactly the same thing, except that the pattern has the seam allowance. So the plan is a bit useless. But you'll see that starting from today, where we'll do style line inside the block, the plan will be more necessary. And I also answered that a little later, when you get really used to your block and to pattern making, most of the basic construction line, for example, today the princess line that we will do, could be done right away on the block, so you don't need to do a plan. But since we're beginning in pattern, we'll do the plan and the pattern for all the styles. For today's style, I'm going to reuse the same plan that I used for my basic skirt. I'll just glue a little piece of paper and change the style number. The first style line we'll do is the princess line. We will measure from the pivot point to the center front and report this measurement at the bottom of the skirt. Once you have your reference point, you could just connect the two dots, so the pivot to the bottom of the skirt. Now the princess line is traced, and if I'm talking about the center front piece, the line would continue on the first side of the dart, and if I'm talking about the side panel, the line will continue with the second side of the dart. So we could say that we eliminate the dart. And for sure, we don't have the punch hole either. Now to have a softer style line, we could curve a little bit the side of the dart, both sides of the dart. The way to do it is to go right in the middle of the pivot and the waist level, and you go inside the dart about 3 millimeters. And you do that both sides of the dart. Now we're going to curve the dart from the waist point, touching the 3 millimeter in until the pivot. Now we do have the two pieces on the plan. What we need to add is assembling notch to assemble these two pieces together. Usually we place one notch at the pivot point. This notch will be on both pieces, and another one on the princess line because it's a long assembling line. The important is that you don't place it centered, because centered notch, you could mix up the top and the bottom. Now we just have to put some information that are missing because we now have two pieces. I'll start with the center front piece. I have my fold, the quantity to cut, and I have the name of the piece. I'm going to need the size and the style number. Now for the side piece, I'm going to trace my grain line, always parallel to my center front. Don't forget the arrow for the direction of the cutting. Now we could put the style number and say, what is this piece? This is going to be my side front piece. And we have to cut this piece one pair. We need a left side and a right side. Of course, this is self. And I already have my size that is indicated. Now we do pretty much the same thing for the back. So first measure from center back to the pivot and report the measure at the bottom. Now we just connect the two dots. Same thing for the back, so we're not going to use the punch hole. We will curve the dart, so find the middle point. You go in 3 millimeters on each side of the dart. Then we could trace the curve from the waist, touching the 3 millimeters all the way to the pivot. Now we're going to do the notch, and it's exactly like we did in the front, except that here we're going to place double notch. Now the first one exactly at the pivot, And the second one 1 centimeter down because my basic seam allowance are 1 centimeter. And an example in inches, if you put the main seam allowance 1/2 inch, then your notch would be 1/2 inch apart. Then we place another set of notch on the princess line. Same thing, you don't center the notch. We complete the information now on the first piece. What we're missing is only the style number, the new one, 101. Then the size. On the second piece, we start with the grain line. I'm going to start with the style number, and I'm going to write that this is my side back. This piece is also going to be cut 1 pair in fabric, in self fabric. The plan is completed. We're going to put another piece of paper under and start retracing the piece. You will see that I repeat often the same thing because the steps are pretty much always the same. First thing I will do is place little pins so to make sure that my paper doesn't move. Then I'll put some weight on. Now I'm ready to start my tracing. I'll start at the bottom and I will go all around. Remember that when you have completely straight line, you could just do a little mark here and there, but the curved line, like waist and the dart now, you must trace completely. Now I'm going to indicate my grain line with my pattern awl. Then I remove my pin and I could lift the plan. Now I'm going to just retrace my line. I'm going to start with my center front, that is a continuous line since it's a piece that is on fold of the fabric. Now I'm going to retrace my hemline with the dotted line, princess line and waistline. Don't forget to indicate clearly your notches. Now we're going to report all information starting with the grain line and all the written information. We find the 2 little dots that we did and we just connect the line. Now we're going to put the seam allowance. I'm starting with the hem line. Usually a nice hem is about 4 centimeters or 1.5 inches. Then we just add the usual seam allowance. And don't forget, when you trace curved line, you trace just for a little while at the time. You could see with the transparent ruler, you could see where the line touched the little dotted from the tracing wheel. You hold it there and you pivot the ruler to trace a little more. Right away, you cut your piece. Again, remember to keep the piece that is good inside your scissors and you cut also inside your line. I'm going to do my notch right away, starting at the hem and the 2 reference I have on my princess line. Again, if you prefer to put your notcher upside down, you could still do it. This way you could see the reference exactly. If you feel ready, you use it on the right side and you see the tiniest place here that you will align with the notch. And if you notice, I did not transfer it to the outside line. So you just align it there to your mark and notch. For this piece, we also have the half notch that I place at the waist and center front because the piece is still on fold of the fabric. Now we're going to place the plan to be able to trace the second piece. So move it, make sure you have enough for your seam allowance and hem at the bottom, and we're going to pin it. So now I'm going to trace. Remember that the long distance straight line, just do a little reference here and there. And for the curved line, trace for a little while, lift your tracing wheel and trace a little more. Now you indicate all notches, the grain line. Then you could remove the pin and lift the plan. We retrace all the contour and this time it's all dotted line. I'm now going to retrace my grain line. We now put the information on the pattern piece. We're ready for the seam allowance. I'm starting with the bottom with the hem. Same 4 centimeter or 1.5 inches. Then the basic or regular seam allowance on all the other lines. Now we do the notch. You have 2 reference on the princess line, 2 notches for the hem. You have to indicate here on both sides, and you have the hip notch. We're ready for the next piece. Again, you just make sure that you have enough for your seam allowance, and of course for the hem. You pin, then you trace all around. I'm doing my side piece. I indicate my grain line. Here again, we retrace all the lines in dotted line. The grain line. Now all information. Now all seam allowance. Then we cut. Then we notch. Remember, this piece also needs notch for the hem on both sides. Now we get ready for the last piece. The pins. We're tracing. The grain line. We trace our lines, and here again everything is dotted. Now the grain line. Now we report the informations. The center front was on fold, but this is center back piece, and this one is going to be cut 1 pair because we do need an opening. Now we put the seam allowance, starting with the hem. Right away, I'm going to put my center back seam. Here I want to do a lap zipper, so I will put a 2 centimeter or pretty much 3/4 inch. The other 2 lines, princess line and the waist, I'll put my usual seam allowance. Here again, we need to indicate the hem on both sides of the piece. Then you have the 2 double notch on the princess line, and you have the double notch that indicate the opening at the center back. It was at 18 centimeters down from the waist, and the other one another centimeter. To those notch, we need to add 2 more to indicate the unusual seam allowance. Here I put a 2 centimeter on center back because of the zipper I'm sewing. So I'm going to indicate it at the bottom and on top of the piece, just like that. Now we're ready to cut the piece. Now we have to notch the last piece, and before to do it I wanted to share a little trick with you in case you have your notcher for a long time or you drop it on the floor and it doesn't remove the notch. It cuts it but doesn't remove it properly. Maybe it needs to be sharpened a little bit. So take a piece of foil paper and fold it a few times and just do a few notches. This should sharpen your notcher. There you go, you complete your second skirt pattern. We have the 4 pattern piece for the panel skirt. That's it for today. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching. I see you next time.